Right, we're now onto the infrastructure strategy, the long-term issues for Auckland's infrastructure. We have Megan and Greer. I'll just move this and Councillor Dalton would like to second, and we'll just hear the presentation. We'll just watch the just have the brief presentation and then go straight to you, Councillor Walker.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Greer Lees toko ingoa. I'm the manager of the infrastructure strategy team that sits in CPO. We've got a short presentation. You've seen the report. Hopefully we'll run through the key points. Megan is going to run through the presentation and the key points, and then we can move quickly to the discussion.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Megan Howard. We are here today to talk about updating the 2021 infrastructure strategy for the 2024 LTP. That document will be adopted as part of the LTP next June, but we're here early to get some direction on the significant issues for infrastructure that will be used to develop that strategy. Right. The infrastructure strategy itself is a 30-year document. It's required by the Local Government Act, and it's there to reassure our communities that councils are planning for infrastructure in the years beyond the 10-year budget portion of the LTP. So it enables us to look at long-term issues alongside the kind of trade-off and budget setting decisions that are made in that 10-year budget. The strategy covers council's infrastructure assets. It covers portfolios of transport, regional and community parks and facilities, waste, urban regeneration, and in whatever form we're directed to by water reform, it may or may not cover 3 waters. All of those assets are long-term assets, so we need to plan in the long term for them. It's also worth noting that the infrastructure strategy is really closely audited, and our auditors are looking to see that we're aware of and planning for the big issues that are going to face our infrastructure systems. Right, so the infrastructure strategy forms part of the long-term plan document. It plays a role in the LTP of testing the assumptions and the evidence that we use to build our infrastructure investments. What the infrastructure strategy can do is provide a level playing field for looking across all of council's infrastructure investment, and to do that we work really closely with council infrastructure providers and with their asset data, and we use a standardised criteria for looking across our infrastructure planning. What that process enables us to do is to ask and answer questions around: are we managing our asset risk? So are we renewing and maintaining our assets so that they can perform their functions? Are our planned solutions and investments fit for purpose? And does our investment deliver the best return investment over the long term? So they're all ways of asking, how can we spend efficiently in the long term? So we need to start the infrastructure strategy with a clear set of long-term issues. And we need to do that for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we are required to under the Local Government Act. Audit will test us on that. And also because if we are clear now about the issues that we see enduring through the 30 years of the LTP, we can plan for them. So it gives us a consistent framework for understanding the long-term implications of how we're choosing to invest now. Right. The report that we've tabled today sets out our staff analysis of the issues for 2024. In 2021, you can see that we used 5 issues: greenhouse gas emissions, resilience, inequity, funding gaps, and growth. We've gone back to our infrastructure providers and confirmed that those issues are still relevant for long-term planning. We are also proposing the addition of 2 issues for 2024, Te Ao Māori infrastructure and environmental degradation. Both of those new issues are significant in central government direction. They are significant in the strategy that Council has agreed with our communities, and they were seen as areas for greater progress in the Auckland Plan Progress Report, which was shared with this committee earlier in the month. So they are live issues for building and understanding our infrastructure investments. All 7 issues are long-term issues. We know that their relative importance and urgency will change at various points in the 30 years, but we expect that they will endure. And so the issues will be used in the LTP to direct focus and direct scenarios for the development of investment. And then those priorities are considered and balanced in that 10-year budget making decision. And just a little more on how the issues inform the LTP itself. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have the 7 issues that we're proposing: greenhouse gas emissions, resilience, growth, inequity, funding gaps, Te Ao Māori infrastructure, and environmental degradation. Those issues get built into the tools that we use to inform the LTP. So those tools are the central list there. The issues become cornerstones for those tools, and there are 2 types of tools in a way. There are tools that we use to build our investment plans. The first 3, we have a strategic investment framework, the asset management plans themselves, and an investment hierarchy. And the issues also get built into the tools we use to test and measure our infrastructure investment. So our investment prioritisation tool and the accountability requirements of Audit New Zealand. What you can see on the right-hand side is that those tools eventually provide advice for LTP decision-making, which then becomes part of the LTP documentation. They do that by informing trade-off decisions and scenarios that are considered for infrastructure investment, and then eventually they're captured in the infrastructure strategy document as a most likely scenario for infrastructure investment. So I want to be clear, though, that ultimately the prioritisation decisions happen in the LTP decision-making, not in the infrastructure strategy, but the infrastructure strategy issues direct the focus and the scenarios that we consider in the development of the 10-year budget. All right, this is a place to stop. These are the resolutions in our report. We are asking for endorsement of the issues and asking that this committee proposes to the governing body that these issues are used to consider infrastructure investment plans for the LTP.
Thank you. Awesome. We have 2 questions so far. Councillor Walker's first up.
Just to short circuit things, Mr. Chair, I plan to ask my question then make a comment at the same time. Okay, the most significant item that needs to be added to the list of issues, if you can go to that, is broadly technology. There's a revolution that's happening right now. It doesn't have to be foresighted because it's real. And it is the phenomenal development that's occurring across electrification, battery development, associated buffering, full self-drive, which is imminent within a number of years, if not in the near horizon, and renewables. It's been driven by companies like Tesla and BYD. So you're seeing exponential uptake of electric vehicles. You're seeing the price driven down. You're seeing vehicles being produced by press technology. That is happening. It's going to be akin to the shift from the horse to the motor vehicle. That's what's happening right now. It's akin to what happened in terms of smartphone technology. So it has to be up there. It has a huge impact on funding, because we don't actually have to fund it. The marketplace and people will fund it because the vehicles are cheaper and they're cheaper to run, particularly given that most people don't actually buy a vehicle outright, they actually lease it, so the running costs are less. And if you have the development of the robot car, which you won't even have to own, then the uptake will be so fast, it'll be scarcely unimaginable. So I'd just make a plea that technology needs to be up there. If it's not, we are discounting the most significant thing that influences all of the others in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, resilience, inequity, funding gaps, okay? And it is not simply a response. Funding is a response. This is an issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll ask for a staff response. I mean, I guess technology is across everything since the wheel, I guess. So I don't know how to respond to putting that as a new issue.
Well, it's akin to the others. I mean, what are the others? What's growth?
Yeah, so I might just get an answer from.
Yeah, kia ora, thanks Chair, and thanks Councillor Walker for the question and for giving us a heads up about your thoughts beforehand. We do see, as I mentioned earlier, that technology is more something that we would deploy in response to the fact that we are facing these issues. I definitely take your point about the fact that technology is changing constantly and at a huge rate, and our infrastructure assets need to respond to those. I guess the third thing is that we don't provide the power network, and so we've got an infrastructure strategy for our assets our infrastructure assets that we own and manage, but we respond, I guess, to the changes in the power network. We look at those issues, but we're not looking to put them as an issue in themselves. We're happy to consider technology as something that sits on the issue side rather than the response side, but in the previous infrastructure strategy, that's how we have seen it, as a response.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just by way of response, I mean, we, unlike other cities, and I can point to any number of others, we don't have an energy strategy, yet it is one of the most significant things that impacts on our city. Just because we don't have things doesn't mean to say that they aren't things that we influence. So we should be. We have a water strategy, for example, and water goes beyond the simple deployment of the water that we control. It's broader than that. Energy is much the same. This is not something that we are deploying. It's happening, and we are responding to it. So, in much the same as we are responding to greenhouse gas emissions, we are responding to issues around resilience, we are also responding to technology, and particularly the technology that I'm describing. I mean, other cities have it up there. I could enumerate any number of others. It is the most significant thing that we should be considering. If we were in Los Angeles, for example, we wouldn't even be having the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Evening all. So just I see where you've, in the issues, you've defined equity as providing basic services equitably and providing services to support communities of greatest need. How have you defined greatest need?
That was the framing that we used for the 2021 strategy. We would likely use similar phrasing around communities of greatest need. It's something that was embedded in the previous LTP using primarily data around deprivation index scores, but we do have work ongoing to understand that in the context of infrastructure.
Through the Chair, if I could just add to that, Councillor Baker, I think this is a conversation we want to have with you through the LTP as well. So while this is particularly helps to frame where the infrastructure strategy might go, it's really important for the 10-year long-term plan as well. So we'd like to keep talking to you about this and about what that looks like for you when you make your decisions on the long-term plan as well.
But if I can think of, I can make an assumption what Andy was alluding to. I think it's an important point that inequity isn't just around potentially income. It could be inequity based on what part of the city you live, access to infrastructure, rural communities, which, as I'm sure Greg as well would attain to, is that we often miss, or the discussion can miss our rural communities, which are some of the biggest in New Zealand, but not seen as often part of the city. So Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, and thanks, Greer and team. In the growth area, the growth issue, I've been thinking about that a lot and thinking about how growth is not just accommodated, but infrastructure draws growth into particular areas, and often it's running counter to strategic plans, possibly, and even plan changes. There's say an infrastructure provider like Auckland Transport or Waka Kotahi's could kick off a designation process, and next thing you're on a journey of infrastructure that you didn't anticipate just because an entity kicked off that process. So, and I know you're aware of this problem. Is this likely to get us into that discussion of how to deal with these disparate moving parts, all trying to do good, but often the outcome is bad?
Kia ora. Thanks for the question, Councillor Darby. The infrastructure strategy itself really responds to Council's strategic direction, and so the key piece of direction that we'd be responding to would be the future development strategy once adopted. So the strategic direction in there around growth will then guide how we respond and provide infrastructure to support that growth. The FDS is working with other parties as much as to what extent we can, to sort of manage that almost uncoordinated nature of some of those infrastructure impacts, giving us growth in places we didn't necessarily anticipate it to. But in terms of the issue that the infrastructure strategy does address is around, coordinating infrastructure investment to support growth in the right places. And that right places bit being about spending our investment for growth in the places that it's most likely to be and that it's going to be most efficient to support growth. Does that answer?
Yeah, look, we can have another discussion. It's a big conversation. Let's leave it there for now. I know it's on your radar. Yeah, thanks.
Cool, thank you. That looks like Councillor Filipino, no question. Right. Councillor Fletcher.
A small question, but it's of Megan Taylor. How does this align with the policy work that's being undertaken with the Transport and Infrastructure Committee? I just want to make sure that we're not getting involved in terms of duplication. And I know that from my perspective, it's really important that when we're looking at growth, we're factoring in Plan Change 78, all of these sorts of things. So perhaps Megan can give us an overview where, under the long-term issues of Auckland infrastructure, the body of work sits with this committee and where it sits with the Transport and Infrastructure Committee.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Fletcher. And this is something we'll continue to just work through as we have been the last few months. In terms of the terms of reference, it's quite clear that this committee sets the strategic direction or the policy for council, including around infrastructure, and that the Transport Infrastructure Committee is the outworking or the delivery of that. The exception there is, of course, the Regional Land Transport Plan, which and the CCO accountability with Auckland Transport, that sits with the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and the RLTP as a policy, a piece of policy strategic direction sits with that. But otherwise, this committee would set the direction, and then the outworking of that, the delivery of that, would be through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, for example, like light rail or additional harbour crossing, updates on water infrastructure, for example, that you're working through at the moment. So this is a key strategic document that for the council. The thing here, though, is it also connects to the long-term plan, which of course is finance and governing body matter, and so that's why you see in B, we don't want to duplicate, we don't want to take responsibility out of either the Transport Committee or governing body, so we want to do it in the right way, and in this case we will pull it up into governing body because it will ultimately be part of the broader long-term plan conversation, which in time will flow back to your committee in the Transport Committee to see the outworking of that. Is that helpful, and can I provide any more advice?
I think it's the beginnings of a really good conversation. But I do struggle a little bit with the delegation of the transport plan that the Mayor is particularly keen to see developed, because I personally don't think you can divorce transport from the broader issues of infrastructure and growth. So it's really important to me that there is clarity around the alignment, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to make sure that there is that ongoing dialogue, and I'm sure the same for the chair, Councillor Watson. But thank you.
Thank you. Look, certainly as staff, we want to try and make this as workable and practical as possible. So please, let's just keep talking about that as chairs and deputy chairs, but also as staff, about making sure we're doing the right thing and that we are aligning, because it's exactly what we all want to be doing. So appreciate your assistance. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
A specific request for inclusion, Mr Chair. Am I to assume that's been integrated, or do I need to make an amendment?
Look, I mean, I see your point, but I guess it's not a concern. I think your view has been given, but I mean, essentially, technology is just the use of knowledge to.
This is fundamental, Mr Chair.
No, I know. I guess
mean,
if you would let me finish just for a second. So, I mean, technology generally is just the use of our knowledge and skills and science for the ability to do everything council does, including all the issues above. So
I've enumerated specific technology, and that technology goes specifically to infrastructure and especially to transport. It is not being adequately factored by this organisation at all. The consequences on our budget, the consequences on climate change and everything we do are nothing short of staggering. It's happening now. We shouldn't be like a dinosaur. It's relevant to everything up there.
Exactly. So I guess.
At what point do we get real about this, Mr Chair?
So I guess it's a matter of opinion whether to add an. Well, I guess to me, my view is that technology isn't an emerging issue. Technology crosses everything because it's the ability to do everything we do. Technology is just using your knowledge and science.
What's funding that? I mean, it's as relevant, if not more relevant, than many of the factors, many of the issues.
Councillor Henderson, sorry to hear.
Thanks. Correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're both agreeing with each other vociferously that technology touches upon every single thing on the board, so I don't see what the problem is. Why can't we just pass the recommendation?
With each other. Yeah.
So just all I'm asking.
I just don't have the. So if it sends up another stream, I guess if we're talking the definitions of technology, it crosses everything council does. It's just the.
I gave some specific examples, Mr. Chair.
I know, but that's.
I'm happy to work on this with the officers.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to take it as feedback, but I don't think we need to add it as an emerging, as its own separate issue. Technology is.
I beg to differ with you, Mr. Chair. If you want to defer this item, fine. If the officers need some time to consider it, if they need some information, I'm sure that can be provided for them. But it is basic, and it is happening, and it is revolutionising the transport space and the energy space. And they are two of the most key parts of infrastructure that we actually have to deal with.
Okay. Well, look, I'm not trying to be difficult, but we didn't ask everyone for things to add to the emerging issues. And I would say what you just said is happening, has always happened since the dawn of time as technology has led those issues.
I'm simply putting it to the meeting that it's pretty simple that could be added. I don't think the officers are disagreeing with me. The only person that's largely disagreeing and being difficult is you, as far as I'm concerned.
Point of order, can we please have some respect for the chair?
Well, that's not being particularly respectful of me.
You're not respecting the rules around how we conduct these meetings, actually. So I would appreciate it if we could have things like speaking lists and stuff like that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Look, I'd just like to say the way I'm listening to the conversation as a tradie, you know, when I started in business as a mechanic 40 years ago, you did a clutch job on a car every 2 years. Now you'd be lucky if you do one. That has a huge impact in how you set up your business, how you finance things, it changes everything. You know, the modern car, it is just, as you say, technology growing, but I do understand what the councillor is saying, that it has a dynamic effect materially at the other end of the, so it's kind of supporting both you, but I do think that it can fit in there with all the other things, just like growth, because I think we do have to work out what the technology is going to do to how we present ourselves physically, dynamically, financially in the future. Thanks.
I mean,
So, thank you, Chair. I think, firstly, we might as well go through all our agenda, through all our committees, and put in technology. We need to do that. We'll put technology in all of our recommendations, because that's exactly what we should be doing. So, Chair, from my perspective, I agree with you. Technology does cover everything that we end up doing, and if we're going to pick little things that we can put in technology, we might as well stay here till 10 o'clock and then wait for all the other agendas to come up. It just seems silly that, and I think, Councillor Williamson, you ended up, which was great, when at one of the other items we had, when you said, what the heck is happening? I agree with you in this regard too. What the heck is happening? I mean, for us to end up cherry picking the word, to do that, Chair, I think we should move on. I totally agree in regards to your stance, and not to put in technology. And just let's move on to the next agenda.
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
So I'll move it as an amendment, Mr. Chair, and I'll call for a division.
Okay. Well,
Quite happy to do that.
well, technically you had your speaking turn earlier, so I shouldn't allow an amendment. But Councillor Ferry.
I was just going to say that I feel like technology is a part of all of those issues, and I see, for example, we don't have climate action up there because, again, it's at the core of what this work is. We don't need to put it in as a separate one of the 7 significant infrastructure issues, and adding an 8th, I think it does have implications for the way the work will need to be done when it is something that actually is woven through all of the ones that we see in the 7. So I agree with the Chair. I think we just move forward, please.
Okay. Councillor Newman, you had a question.
Well, is this questions or comments?
At this point, I have no idea.
Sorry?
At this point, I think everyone's having their says and...
the whole purpose of the emissions trading scheme is to allocate capital to invest in technology so as to reduce emissions. The whole purpose of technology in buildings actually is to try and reduce emissions so as to lower the carbon footprint of buildings. Much of the work of the Climate Change Commission is around promoting EVs to reduce emissions through the application of new technology. I suspect some people don't like that bit because they don't like the idea of vehicles on the road, but it is still, nevertheless, technology that is the imperative around this. I'm sure that some people don't really have that much of an interest in technology opportunities per se, but they are fundamental to the infrastructure issues that need to be grasped as per A. If it could be included, that would be fine. I think that would hopefully address it. If other people are absolutely intrinsically opposed to it, that's fine. They don't have to be worried about that. I think that this is a matter that could simply be addressed by inclusion, and hopefully we can just move on from there, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Dalton.
I just think that as a council we've been really quite good at technology. We've proven that through the Value for Money Committee, and that as technology develops we use it, otherwise we'd be still using a Gestetner to print our agendas off. We move with technology and we have some really good partnerships that enable that. I mean, I'm reasonably relaxed as to whether it goes in there or not, but I can completely understand that technology drives everything that we do. It doesn't matter what the topics are. Technology is a fundamental principle of what we do. It's a bit like when I used to talk about climate and say, actually, it should just be in every decision we make now. It doesn't need to be up there as a separate thing. It's a key driver, as is technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I've spent the whole meeting trying my best to keep everyone happy. I guess I wasn't trying to dismiss your comments, Councillor Walker. I was trying to say that technology is already included right along, and I'm worried that if we silo it, it doesn't necessarily make, it's a given that it's included, but I'm like.
Well, it isn't a given, otherwise it would be up there. It's not, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So,
I guess we shouldn't have really been having the debate with the staff there unless you have anything to add, but you probably don't want to at this point. Councillor Lee, last.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Chairman. You're managing a very heavy agenda and some very challenging issues. I think the last thing we want is a division. Divisions are exactly that. Would it hurt just to slip in the word technology amongst those commas and we all move on happily?
Is there, Megan, is there a way to include technology without making it one of the issues? Because I don't know what actually making it its own silo issue actually does. Or is it best just to add it in? And
I have a suggestion. Why don't we make it endorse the significant infrastructure and technology issues to inform the 2024 infrastructure strategy, and that actually elevates it, and then we don't have an eighth issue which does create problems around the work. Agreeing that it's an issue, I'm elevating it. The significant infrastructure and technology issues to inform the 2024 infrastructure strategy.
I think Councillor
Ferry
is raising a really constructive pathway forward.
I think if we add that in there as what Councillor Ferry said.
He's such an objection.
And thank you all. This is nothing of this item has gone through standing orders, so I apologise for that.
He never ever contributes anything.
Yeah.
He just gratuitously picks officers. Never does.
And then that way technology is across all of, and that way Councillor Walker's point I think is covered because technology is across all the issues. Right. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Yes. Just to say yes for Wayne. Just to say it was. I'm against.
Cool. So Councillor Filipina and Councillor Walker opposed.
No, I'll oppose it as well.
Okay. Right. We did start 2 hours later than we were supposed to, so let's not feel too bad about the meeting. Right, now we go to, thank you very much